Alright, I have a quick video inbound. Just gonna talk about some books I got and then read from them a little. And then maybe read some good poetry. So I went back home for the Thanksgiving holiday and I went to my favorite bookstore over in Denton, the Recycled Books and Records. It has it's the best bookstore I've ever been to, but I found some good books there, and they had a Black Friday sale, so I got one book that I had been waiting a long time to get because it's very expensive really, and it's this book here, The Collected Poems of Conrad Aiken, and it was published in 1970. But since they had a sale and I traded in some of my books, I was able to get it, and he's really one of my favorite poets. It always surprises me that he's not more famous, but really I do understand why he's not more famous. It's easier just to like fewer poets. But I want to read the start of one poem here, because he was really good friends with T.S. Eliot. They were actually 1 year apart. T.S. Eliot was just about a year older, but they went to school. I'm pretty sure it was Harvard. They both went to Harvard at the same time. But late in life, must have been the 50s or 60s, he wrote a poem called The Morning Song of Lord Zero. And this is how it goes. The Morning Song of Lord Zero. Gambler and spendthrift by nature, chameleon soul whose name is Zero, anonymous in headlines, nameless in breadlines, nevertheless, I am your hero. Today an upstart millionaire from Mozambique, polyglot but sans Latin and sans Greek, très debonair, très chic. I am inscrutably someone else tomorrow when I speak. All languages at will. The cashier's till spills me a quicksilver word. The gilded shill coos me another. I am your Jack and Jill. Of all trades, dubious brother, panhandler father, Cassandra mother, and yet in the end insidiously, oh, indispensably and invidiously, something more. Watch me sneak from door to door. It's it's so similar to the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. It's too funny, but yeah, I think he was just messing with his old friend. That's how I see it, but yeah, it's hilarious. Then let's see. I guess the next thing I'll show is I got one of the Virago Modern Classics, which is apparently a lot of female authors, but I don't know if that's true. But anyway, this is Dorothy Richardson, The Pilgrimage series. It's, I think, 12 books. This is the first 3. And I think she's considered to be the first one to use stream of consciousness in English. She was born, I think, the same year as Proust. And she published this, The Pointed Roofs, in 1915, which is the first volume of this novel. She considers all the books part of one novel, I guess. So, but I read it at my school, and I wanted to get it partially because it's a well-known modernist, and I just want to have them all. But it also was interesting, and there's definitely, just looking in my stack here that I have, it's all men. I need to buy The Waves by Virginia Woolf, because that's one of hers I really like, but yeah, it's a whole bunch of dudes, which isn't bad, but now I have Dorothy Richardson. Okay, I'll go the third most interesting now. So, with my recent interest in Robert M. Coates, he was interested in the writing of Nathaniel West, And Nathaniel West was, I think he's most famous for The Day of the Locust and Miss Lonely Hearts. He was in like Hollywood and wrote, I think, like movie screenplays. But his first book was published in 1931 when he was, I think, like 27 or 28. And it's called The Dream Life of Balzo Snell. And I read about that because in the biography of Robert Coates, it talked about like experimental fiction coming from America. And I had always assumed Nathaniel West was like a genre writer, like, because I always hear him talked about as like, oh, like some like noir, like edgy Hollywood guy. But this is completely different and it's hilarious. So this is the beginning of the dream life of Balzo Snell. While walking in the tall grass that has sprung up around the city of Troy, Balzo Snell came upon the famous wooden horse of the Greeks. A poet, he remembered Homer's ancient song and decided to find a way in. On examining the horse, Balzo found there were but 3 openings: the mouth, the navel, and the posterior opening of the alimentary canal. The mouth was beyond his reach, the navel proved a cul-de-sac, and so forgetting his dignity, he approached the last. O anus mirabilis! Along the lips of the mystic portal he discovered writings which after a little study he was able to decipher. Engraved in a heart pierced by an arrow and surmounted by the initial N, he read, Ah, qualis, artifex, pareo, not to be outdone by the actor emperor. Balzo carved with his penknife another heart and the words, O bis, O abyss, O anon, O anan, omitting, however, the arrow and his initial. Before entering he prayed, O beer, O Meyerbeer, O Bock, O Offenbach, stand me now as ever in good stead. Balzo immediately felt like the 1 at the bridge, the 2 in the bed, the 3 in the boat, the 4 on the horseback, the 7 against Thebes, and with a high heart he entered the gloom of the foyer-like lower intestine. After a little while, seeing no one and hearing nothing, Balzo began to feel depressed. To keep his heart high and yet out of his throat, he made a song. Round as the anus of a bronze horse, or the tender buttons used by horses for ani, on the wheels of his car, ringed round the brass, clamor the seraphim tongues of our Lord, full ringing round as the belly of Silenus, Giotto, painter of perfect circles, goes one motion round and full as a brimming goblet, the dew-loaded navel of Mary our mother, round and ringing full as the mouth of brimming goblet, the rust-laden holes in our Lord's feet. Entertain the Jew-driven nails. He later gave this song various names, the most successful of which were Anywhere Out of the World, or A Voyage Through the Hole in the Mundane Millstone, and At Hoops with the Ani of Bronze Horses, or Toe Holes for a Flight of Fancy. Despite the gaiety of his song, Balzo did not feel sure of himself. He thought of the Phoenix excrementi, a race of men he had invented one Sunday afternoon while in bed, and trembled, thinking he might well meet one of them in this place. I probably read a little too long there, but it's very funny. And this is, they usually sell his complete works in one book, so that may be something good to get if you're interested in it. Alright, I got 2 more. Let's see. Yeah. So, I was talking a little bit about the Turkish book that was published this year in English for the first time, The Disconnected, by Oğuz Atay. And I guess I'll talk just a little bit about this book. So, the background of this book is a Turkish guy in the late 60s decided to write this book, and the translator into English is named Seven Sadie, and she lived fairly close to Oğuz Atay. I can't remember where they lived, but anyway, they lived close, and he would always go to her house to borrow her typewriter. So as he would write in Turkish, he would finish a page, she would take it and translate it to English right there. And then when he got done writing for the day, they would talk about what she had translated and what he had written. And so that manuscript was finished, in the late 60s. And then the book came out in Turkish, and then the author died in 1977 from brain cancer, and none of his books had been reprinted when he was alive. But after he died, I think several years later, they were reprinted, and then now supposedly 1 million people in Turkish have read The Disconnected, and it's had like 70 editions. But just a couple of years ago, it came out in Dutch and German. And it came out in Dutch and German because the publishers and the translators were sent the manuscript in English that had already been completed by Seven Sadie. But just this year, a press called Ulrich Press, which I think only publishes this book because there's like a character in here named Ulrich. They just put out 200 copies. And I think they're all gone from the publisher. Maybe they're available secondhand, but I was able to snatch one. But I think I'll read one section from it. Because I guess I'll kind of tell a little about the story. So it's an interesting story. The basis of the book is there's like a prologue kind of before all the story. It's kind of like a foreword, actually, where the publisher, the publisher, says that he just received this manuscript for the book The Disconnected, and it was by this engineer, Turgut, something Osman or something like that, who had just disappeared. But the manuscript is about Turgut, the engineer, looking for his friend, the guy he knew in college named Selim, who has recently killed himself and sent the suicide note to Turgut. So the engineer is trying to find out about Selim, just trying to see what his life was like, and then he drops off the manuscript and disappears himself. And then, so this book is kind of like a found manuscript, kind of like Either or Adán Buenos Aires, that type of thing, which I really like. I really like that style. But so it kind of goes like that. There's a 600-line poem with commentary, like Pale Fire. There's like a 90-page stream of consciousness section. But I want to read just one short section in the beginning that I think anyone who reads can relate to. Let's see. All right. Okay. With no enthusiasm, he got up and went to stand in front of his bookshelves. Books he had bought imitating Selim, hundreds of books, most of them unread. If you read for 5 years without once leaving the room, you might just about get through them, Selim had said. Nonsense. He suddenly burned with the desire to read them all, a familiar desire which surfaced each time he caught sight of them. So how many pages have we here? 1,000, 5,000, 10,000? How many minutes do I need per page? How many hours a day have I got, after allowing for eating and sleeping? And I have more time on Saturdays, Sundays, holidays, and then I can swallow them all if I want to. He remembered his school days, no different from today. He would grab a book, read a few pages, and soon feel deflated like a pricked balloon, only to attack another book. This hopeless struggle which would always end with his giving up on the whole thing and returning to life, followed by spasms of shame and regret. With some difficulty he tore himself away from the bookcase. Let us not make the same old mistakes. So, yeah, that's that. And then I'll just talk a little bit about the last book that I found. It's called A Drunk Man Looks at the Thistle by Hugh MacDiarmid. And that's what it looks like. And I've actually known about this poem for a really long time. I mean, 4 years, if that counts as a really long time. But I would always see it in lists of like the most famous modernist poems or the greatest works of modernism of that era. But anytime I had looked it up, it had been in Scots, in the dialect. And some of the words in Scots are pretty easy, or they're almost exactly the same as English. But some of the words you cannot guess in any way. Like it's more or less completely different vocabulary that you'd never be able to know. So the good thing about this edition is that they reprint the original like in Scots, but then they have kind of like in a Middle English text, they have the words that are uncommon for like a native English speaker. They have the uncommon words out to the side. So yeah, I think I'll just kind of read it in like a, I'm not even going to try to fake a Scottish accent. I'll just read it kind of like how the words look, and then I'll just like give an example of how it translates it. So this was published in 1926. So, and I think the guy was born in 1892. So he was like thoroughly of the modernist era, like 4 years younger than T.S. Eliot, that type of thing. A drunk man looks at the thistle. I am na foe sae muckle as tired, died doon. It's gay and hard work coping glass for glass. We Cruivy and Gilsan Kohar and the like, and I'm no jaist as bald as ains I was. The elbuck fenkles in the course o' time, the shekels no sae supple, and the thrapple grows daif and dour, nae langer up and doon, gleg as a squirrel spiels the Adam's apple. So that, so like the beginning, I am na foo sae muckle as tired, and it says drunk as much, and then exhausted. So I am not drunk as much as tired, exhausted. It's gay and hard work, cooping glass for glass, which upending glass for glass, drinking. And then with Cruivy and Gilsan Kohar and the like types of alcohol. And I'm no jeest as bald as aince I was. And I'm not just as bald as once I was. The elbuck fankles in the course of time. The elbow becomes clumsy in the course of time. The shekels no sae supple, and the thrapple. The wrist's not supple, and the gullet, this thrapple, grows deaf and dour, nae langer up and down, grows unimpressionable, no longer stiff, or, yeah, stiff. Grows unimpressionable and stiff, yeah. Gleg as a squirrel spiels the Adam's apple. Lively is Gleg, lively as the squirrel climbs the Adam's apple. So it's kind of like reading Chaucer in the original Middle English, and I've always loved reading Chaucer in the original, so I think if you can find a copy of this, it's very interesting. And I don't think really much else in Scottish literature is popular. I can't really think of anything. Well, Robert Burns, of course, and he makes references to Robert Burns. But like David Hume. But yeah, that's really that's all the books I got recently. I had a good one. I traded in some books, so I don't feel as bad. And then there was someone that recommended me a book, Whatever Happened to Modernism by Gabriel Josipovici or something. I did actually read that, and I enjoyed it. The guy has a really, funny style, how he's rather like indignant about a lot of views of modernism, but I have to say that I found it like pretty bizarre that he would go to like Wordsworth and like the Greek playwrights, and then how he talked so much about British like post-war authors and French Nouveau Roman authors. He really like didn't hardly spend any time talking about actual modernists, which was disappointing to me. He talked about. I did get a greater appreciation of Marcel Duchamp from that book, and so I really appreciate that. But other than talking a little bit about like T.S. Eliot and like just very little, he talked more about Duchamp than anyone else. It was just yeah, it was just disappointing. I mean, it was good to read, but I don't know. But yeah, whoever recommended that to me, thanks. I like to read some nonfiction stuff every once in a while. It always goes much quicker than fiction, so. But yeah, so do any of these books look interesting to you guys? Or have any of you read Nathaniel West or Dorothy Richardson or A Drunk Man Looks at the Thistle? Well, anyway, let me know. Feel free to leave a comment. I like reading them. Death is a gang boss.